Good morning, friends. Welcome back. Friday, February 9th. And today we're going to chat about some things I've been reading and start you off with a little bit of a focused thought from the Daily Stoic, Ryan Holiday's book. I would advise it's a great book to kickstart your thinking about your life and how some Stoic ideals can apply to your life. I'm a big fan of his work. If you're interested in Stoicism, you may want to look at some of his books before you kick into the source material. So Ryan Holiday has Ego is the Enemy, Stillness is the Key, The Obstacle is the Way. They were the first three that I got to read and that I got to go through. And what he does is he takes some of the things from Seneca and Marcus Aurelius and others and really puts a spin on them, and in some ways gives you some interpretation. So it's a great starting point if you don't want to go back into some of the old Greek writings to begin. He gives you a good ground to get grounded in some of those philosophies. So this comes from Passions and Emotions, February 9th, today's thought for the day. And it's titled, You Don't Have to Have an Opinion. We have the power to hold no opinion about a thing, and to not let it upset our state of mind. For things have no natural power to shape our judgments. Marcus Aurelius from Meditations. Here's a funny exercise. Think about all the upsetting things you don't know about. Stuff people might have said about you behind your back, mistakes you might have made that never came to your attention, things you dropped or lost without even realizing you dropped or lost them. What's your reaction? You don't have one because you don't know about it. In other words, it's possible to hold no opinion about a negative thing. You don't need to cultivate the power instead of wielding it accidentally. You just need to cultivate the power instead of wielding it accidentally, especially when having an opinion is likely to make us aggravated. Practice the ability of having absolutely no thoughts about something. Act as if you have no idea it ever occurred, or that you've never heard of it. Let it become irrelevant or non-existent to you. It'll be a lot less powerful this way. And, opening us up, I think that's a great thought. I think it's a really good area to explore. My earlier video today, my morning ice plunge thought, I veered off a poem and I told a story, and the idea of the story was the dichotomy of control. And it's that idea of looking at the world around us, looking at what happens, and realizing there's some things we can control and there's some things that we can't control. And we call that our sphere of control. So once you come to terms with what is in your sphere of control, that's the things you worry about. That's the things that you try to improve, work on, and confront. Then there's other things, the way other people behave, the weather, your boss, that are outside our sphere of control. And rather than spending all of our time angry or miserable or complaining about those things, which no matter what we do, we can't change them. All it does is it aggravates us, it makes us upset, and most importantly, the time we spend on the things we can control takes away from the time we can spend on the things we can control. And that dichotomy of control is such an important lesson, because we all get caught up. We all get caught up in petty frustrations and getting upset with a coworker, or getting upset that, a friend did something. And really, there's nothing we can do about that. It lies completely outside of our capabilities. So I think it's good food for thought. It's something good to try to remind ourselves. And like everything that I talk about, it's a practice, and it's got to become a daily practice, because I can only speak for myself. When I'm not conscious and I'm not aware, I find myself going into those things I can't control. Because in some ways they're easier. because I just complain about them. I don't have to work. I don't have to do anything. I just complain that, oh, I can't believe so-and-so did this, or I can't believe that, or I can't believe it's going to rain today when I had these plans. And complaining is far easier than fixing. And when we look at what we can control, our hand is forced that we have to fix those things. So that's where my head's going today. So I wanted to start us off with that. I think starting off with some kind of a thought, something that we can ponder, is always a good way to get the brain, knock the cobwebs off and get things moving forward. So today I wanted to talk about two things, two books that I am quote unquote reading. And I say that because one of the books I listen to on Audible. However, I think that if you listen deeply on Audible, if you really take the time to not be doing something else while you listen, but really focusing and listening, you can, in essence, read a book by hearing it. And, in the classroom, I found it very helpful because there's quite a few students who struggled with reading. And one of the reasons they struggled with reading was they had a hard time moving beyond words into ideas. So when I say that, a really solid reader, when we read, we almost see the book like a movie, because as we're reading it, our brain is putting it all together very quickly, from words to sentences to ideas to a vision and to a visual. And that's one of the reasons that when you talk to somebody who really loves reading and has read a book, the movie often doesn't live up, because the movie is the director's and the actor's view of this book. And that doesn't always match up with the reader's view of this book. And for those who struggle with reading, who get bored, who really have a hard time just sitting down with the pages, audiobooks are a great solution. They're definitely a great method that work. You can do an Audible subscription. You also, if depending on the library system that you're a part of, I know where I live, Cape May County Library System has a program called Libby, Libby. It's an app you can download on your phone. You put in your library card number, and you can check out audiobooks through Libby. And I know that because my daughter, who lives in Charleston, she turned me on to Libby. She uses Libby down there, and then we have the same program up here. So the first book I will talk about, and plug to the Cape May County Library, because both of my books are coming from there. The first book I talked about before was 100 Things We've Lost to the Internet. And this is a collection of essays that looks at skills and experiences that don't exist anymore. So without getting into the whole generational fight thing, because sometimes that annoys me, how, a generation will, the latest generation has no idea what this is. Yeah, and in the same way, we didn't know what things that our parents or our grandparents were. This doesn't do it that way. First of all, the author Pamela Paul is definitely not a Luddite. She talks about her use of the internet and the perks, the many good things the internet's given us. But then she goes through a list of 100 essays, very short, 2 to 3 page essays of things we've lost because of our online presence. And I'm just going to highlight a couple of the chapters, and then I will focus on one chapter I liked particularly. We've lost boredom. We're not bored anymore. We just take our phone out, and we look at our phone, and I'll kind of comment on that. The shame with boredom is that in losing boredom, we lose imagination and creativity, because it's in sometimes those boring moments that our brain can be working on other things. We don't get lost anymore. We're all carrying GPS. Those old days of either MapQuest or the fold-up AAA maps that we would have, and taking a wrong turn and trying to figure out what they were. They're kind of gone. We've lost the art of the phone call. Think about yourselves. That was a good chapter. That was an interesting chapter for me, because it really made me think about how often I will text somebody, and in the past, it would have been a phone call. And it's kind of a nice thing. Again, please keep in mind, all of this is coming, depending on what your age is. These are the musings of a 57-year-old. So there's things I like because that's what I grew up with. I went in to meet with somebody yesterday about a position, and he was like, "Oh, we could have done this on the phone." And I'm like, "Well, I really like in-person meetings. I like being able to see somebody and talk to somebody. But even here's a step further, because we don't make phone calls. We text. Everything's a quick text message. And it's gotten so weird. We don't like the surprise phone call. And I'm guilty of this. I will first text somebody and say, is it an okay time to call if I'm going to call them? High school reunions, the surprise of a high school reunion. We track most of these people. We follow them, but track is the wrong word. We follow them on social media. We know what their life has been like. We know what they look like. Those surprises are family gone are gone. This was a big one for me. Record albums. That joy of getting an album, having the liner notes, looking at the cover art, and just experiencing that whole record store and doing and going through that process. Solitude. It's a nice idea sometimes to take your phone and just leave it for a couple hours and really enjoy that solitude. But solitude is really something that we don't have much anymore. The surprise of the weather. There's no more waking up to a surprise snowstorm. Everything's predicted. We know everything's coming. This one's been argued, but penmanship and the importance of penmanship, the importance of handwriting. And I think this one is sort of phasing out. I noticed it this year, the idea of Christmas letters. And, like now we do a lot more digital Christmas cards, but that idea of going to the post office box, finding out who wrote them to you. I think handwritten letters is another one. I love the art of the handwritten letter. It's such a nice thing. So there, and there's quite a few more. There's countless things in here, from card catalogs to Cliff Note books to, sadly, a parent's undivided attention. I live across the street from a playground, so I see that one often. When kids are on the playground and wanting you to pay attention to them, and parents have their phones out, and that idea of undivided attention is really something that we've lost. So let me find the chapter I had that I really kind of wanted to look at, and I'm going to just share one chapter with you. And this one's patience, and I liked this one. So I'll share this with you, and we'll see where we go. Once there was a time for everything, and you had to wait for it. That meant sitting tight until 6 p.m. for the evening news to tell you what terrible things you needed to know, and then until prime time for the appointment television in order to relax once you knew them. You counted down the months for an entire year before you could watch The Sound of Music, The Wizard of Oz, and It's the Great Pumpkin, Charlie Brown, which arrived according to season with a mesmerizing swirl of the CBS special presentation logo spinning to a drumbeat crescendo. There was no recording, and there was no rewinding, and the calendar always ended when Frosty the Snowman made his annual visit. Half the joy was in the run-up previews that infiltrated your weekly dose of Saturday morning Scooby-Doo, the only time of the week in which such cartoons appeared, and thus also something you had to wait for. The VHS player, and to a lesser degree the Betamax, revolutionized viewing habits by offering some modicum of control for the first time. In the 80s, teenagers would watch bad videos on MTV in the hopes that eventually the video they wanted would come on, rushing to the VCR in the first few seconds, always getting it just a moment too late, so that they might record and have the power over their viewing the next time. We did the same thing with the radio, endlessly rotating the dial in search of music that was our own, fingers on the play and record button ready to press them down simultaneously. Suppose you wanted to watch an Olympic feat. That took 4 years because you couldn't call up highlights from the last games on YouTube when there was no YouTube. Want to see that touchdown again? In the 80s, you could rent a DVD of The Greatest Plays from Blockbuster and then traipse back to return it, or wait for a special to surface on ESPN. Waiting, waiting, waiting. Even renting a video from Blockbuster had its inconveniences. Pulling on your shoes, pulling out of the driveway to face traffic, pulling into the video store in that little strip mall that never had enough parking, and then wandering around, wondering if what you were seeking would be shelved in action or thrillers or newly released, and lamenting the fact that nobody ever properly alphabetized the containers. You might get there only to wait in line for 20 minutes because some lady forgot to bring her membership card, only to find that the person in front of you just took out the last available copy of the movie you wanted, so new and desirable that it was stored behind the counter. In the early days of the internet, things still took longer. Remember that minute-long interval in which our modems dialed up a connection, a window opened, and the AOL box icon appeared announcing, "You've got mail." Today, the opening sequence of the Nora Ephron movie of the same name looks like slow-mo. For contemporary comparison, think about the micro interval between the plane touching down on the tarmac and the moment when your phone, which you rescue from airplane mode, offers a working signal. Why must it take so long, you wonder? Your battery's charged. You've got 2 bars. Where's your carrier? Where's the cascade of incoming messages? Why isn't your phone letting you send that text? The wait is interminable. The once ubiquitous progression of discovery, anticipation, patience, impatience, and, wait for it, finally, gratification, is alien to anyone under the age of 15. They can't fathom the notion of a time slot. 70% of video viewing by millennials is time shifted, meaning it's watched at a time other than its original broadcast. Nobody waits for the next episode when they can binge watch the whole darn thing. There's no more sense of we're all in this together when even a live football game and a presidential debate can be paused for a beer run. You can always rewind a precise 15 seconds to catch that scrap of dialogue you missed. You can watch whatever you want, whenever you want it. You never have to get stranded on Gilligan's Island because there's always something else on when you want to see it. And the book proceeds in that direction. Like I said, it in no way trashes all of the benefits that this modern world has given us. Information sitting at our fingertips, although sometimes too much information. I think in today's world, people have so much information, and then they struggle with the wisdom of what to do with it, because it can be overwhelming to have that much information. But there are quite a few things that we've lost, and the expression is the only constant is change. It's going to happen. Change happens. But for those people who feel some of those losses, I recommend it highly. It was a wonderful book that lightheartedly does take a good look at some of the things that have changed in our world. And it should be back in the Cape May County Library by tomorrow. If I don't drop it off today, I'll drop it off tomorrow morning. And I recommend it. It's a really, really good read. The other book, and I did this once before, I just want to make sure that I pull up the name right. The other book that I just finished was Tomorrow and Tomorrow and Tomorrow by Gabriel Zevin. It is a book. Let's see if I can. I don't know if it's really going to work. I was going to try to. Cover looks kind of like that. This is the Audible version. And if you listen to it, it's about 14 hours long. It was a wonderful listen. It was captivating. It was funny. I came to the book late because it was a book about game designers, and I wasn't sure how interested I would be in the world of game design. But it really is about so much more than game design. And in fact, game design becomes a wonderful metaphor for some of the other themes that occur in the book. And I think I addressed this a little bit in last week when I had started reading it and wanted to talk about it. But it opens up with Sadie and Samson, and it begins in their childhood. Sam is in the hospital. He's had a shattered foot, all the bones broken, and he's gone through a very slow recovery and trying to learn to walk and learn to cope through it. And because of that, as a young boy, he's really just miserable and sad and pulls himself away from everybody. And Sadie, who's visiting her sister Ashley, who is going through cancer treatment, is bored. No one's paying attention to her, so she wants to go in the game room and play. So when she goes into the game room, he's there, and they begin playing some video games together. And it pulls him out of his shell. It gets him to a point where he has a friend, and so she continually visits and revisits, and that becomes one plot point on how they react to that. But then as they get into a fight, they grow apart. When they both go to college, one to MIT and one to Harvard, they run into each other again in Cambridge. And what comes from there is a partnership in game design. Ichigo they design this blockbuster monumental game. So in this, it then introduces a third character, Mark, who is Sam's roommate. And the three of them form a company that is a game design company. And now what you have more than game design is you have the dynamics of friendship, dynamics of romance, the misogynistic nature of the gaming industry. It's very hard for Sadie, a female, breaking into this industry and working within this industry. But the great thing about the book is it really spans from when they're children, and then it takes us on up into entering into their 40s. And you see the highs and lows. Obviously, sometimes friendship and business really struggle together. And you see those struggles that arise in here when they have different plans and who gets the attention as for all the game designs. And it's a wonderful, wonderful story about the dynamics of relationships. And Tomorrow and Tomorrow and Tomorrow comes from the Shakespearean play Macbeth. And you'll see that come up toward the end of the story. And it's interesting because, in the tragedy of Macbeth, it's when they're storming the castle and Macbeth is realizing the futility of what is going on and, where things are going, the tale told by an idiot full of sound and fury, signifying nothing. And in here, you get some of those same senses because we're given a position where we hear both Sam's thoughts and Sadie's thoughts. And when stress is arising before them and there's some frustrations and anger and the relationship is struggling, we get a chance to be an outside, not judge, but an outside entity who can see the fault in both of what they're doing and what they're saying. I highly recommend it. I thought it was a wonderful read, and there's just enough game design that's interesting and then not too much that bogs you down if you have no background in that. I'm not a big gamer personally. I don't play any video games. I haven't played video games since I was a kid, and still I found this fascinating. I found the sense of how business relationships work and how those things come together to just be an absolutely fascinating component that works extremely well in it. So they're my two books for today. Next week I'll let you know what's coming up. I got a couple of different things I'm reading right now, so I'll see which one. I may try to do this similar thing, and I don't know if I'm always every week going to be able to talk about a nonfiction and a fiction book, but at the time I kind of have two books that are both going fiction and nonfiction. So I'll see how far along I get in them and if I can cover both of those books. So in closing, I'm going to ask you what's kind of turning into my end of podcast thought, mainly because it's something that I do frequently. I have a book, the 1 Minute Gratitude Journal. So every morning I try to sit down and write 3 things for which I'm grateful. So before you turn away from the podcast and move on to do the next thing that you're going to do, take 3, 5, 10 minutes maybe at most. And if you want to write it down, you can write it down. I like the idea of keeping track. But think about 3 things that occurred, either depending on when you're listening to this, throughout today or to yesterday, for which you're grateful. I'll let you know right now, I'm grateful for all of you who are listening. Have a wonderful day. Have a better weekend. And I'll talk to you on Wednesday. Bye.